Good morning, students. Time for another lesson. Now, we're doing this one as a video lesson because I'm trying out a new technology. We're going to be trying out something called Edpuzzle. So I want to see how it works. So that's why we're going to be doing this as a video, but I hope that you guys like it. We'll see how it goes. All right, so this lesson is on conventions and mechanics, as you guys can see. And normally at this point we would have a bit of a discussion about no red ink, and we would talk about whether you think that no red ink is helpful and useful, why or why not. And we already sort of started this discussion and talked about grammar and discussed whether we think that grammar is important, why or why not. Does no red ink help you with your grammar? And what most of you have told me is that you don't feel like no red ink is helpful because no red ink doesn't teach you lessons. It simply gives you practice. And so what I think that we're going to be doing with this is kind of hopefully taking a step back and starting from the building blocks up and looking at some lessons. And we've been watching those daily videos in class on various lessons, like what is a comma and how do you use it, what's a semicolon and things like that. But I just want to give you a chance to sort of reflect on your experience so far with grammar. Now, we already watched the video, Does Grammar Matter? And we actually also watched the TED Ed video on grammar as well. So we're going to skip that part, but I want you to think about your experience with grammar and how that could be potentially different. All right, so we're going to play a digital version of Four Corners now. Instead of you guys actually running to these different places in the room, we're going to turn this into a digital thing. I'm going to be using this program to try it out. Traditionally, when I've done this, I've shown the word, and then if it's a noun, you run to the front of the room. If it's a preposition, you run to the door. If it's an adjective or adverb, you run to that wall. And if it's a verb, you run to the back of the room. But instead, you guys are just going to be clicking options, theoretically. Okay. So let's review what these different parts of speech are. Preposition. A preposition is a word placed before a noun or a pronoun to form a phrase that modifies another word in the sentence. The young girl brought me a very long letter from the teacher, and then she quickly disappeared. Oh my. Okay, so prepositions are traditionally taught as anything you can do with a cloud. You can go over the cloud, you can go under the cloud, you can go through the cloud, you can go to the cloud, you can go from the cloud, etc. When I was a kid, they taught it as a cat with a box, and I, smarty that I was like, well, you can't go through the box. And then like adult version of me, if I had me as a student, would have been like, my cat would karate ninja claw its way through the box. Now what? So anyway, what about nouns? Nouns are the names of places, people, and things or ideas. A very young girl brought me a very long letter from the teacher, and then she quickly disappeared. Oh my. So girl, letter, and teacher in that are all nouns. You can also have things that are ideas like love. That's an abstract noun. As a general rule, though, nouns are things that you can touch, but again, like I said, there are some abstracts in there like ideas. All right, verbs are pretty easy. A verb expresses an action or a being. The young girl brought me a long letter from the teacher, and then she quickly disappeared. Oh my. So it's the thing that is being done. It is the action that occurs. And finally, adjectives and adverbs. An adjective modifies or describes a noun or a pronoun, okay? Whoop. The young girl brought me a very long letter from the teacher, and she quickly disappeared. Oh my. An adverb, however, and this one is tricky. Everyone knows an adverb modifies or describes a verb, but did you know an adverb could also describe an adjective or another adverb? That's really important because those are the things that get left out a lot of times when you guys are trying to identify sentence parts. The young girl brought me a very long letter from the teacher, and then she quickly disappeared. Oh my. Most people recognize that quickly, that ly, as being an adverb, but the other ones may be a little bit more difficult to spot. All right, ready? What is Sally? It's a noun. Sally is a person. What is on? On is a preposition. Get on the ball. What is desk? Desk is a noun. It's a thing. You can touch it. What is run? Run's a verb, of course. Run to the right corner. Slowly. Slowly is an adverb. Okay, I want you to run, but slowly. Then, adverb. That's one of those tricky ones. Across. Preposition. I hope you went across the room. Big. That's an adjective. Weather. Be careful. This is weather, as in what's blowing outside, not whether we're doing something or not. That's spelled differently. Sit. Verb. All right, game's over. So, conventions are the traits and mechanical correctness of the piece and includes 5 elements: spelling, punctuation, capitalization, grammar and usage, and paragraphing. Writing that is strong in conventions has been proofread and edited with care. Since this trait has so many pieces to it, it's almost an analytical trait within an analytic system. As you assess a piece of convention, ask yourself the question, how much work would a professional copy editor need to do to prepare this piece for publication? This will keep all the elements and conventions in play. In other words, it's all of those tricky little things that you get red marks on your paper for. So you got to watch out for them. Now we're going to go over 10 common grammar mistakes to avoid. These are the big ones, the ones that people say are the reasons that they get fired from jobs or that they don't get hired. So that's why we're going to really make sure that you understand them. Subject-verb agreement. People might say, an important part of my life have been the people who stood by me, but that would be wrong. The correct version is, an important part of my life has been the people who stood by me. If that sounds wrong to you, it's probably because when people speak, they don't really follow those rules of subject-verb agreement. I actually make this mistake verbally frequently when I'm talking to people. But when you're writing, you have to be very careful and make sure that your subjects and verbs agree. So, an important part is one thing. Have is a verb for multiple things. So you have to change it. An important part has. All right. Fragments and incomplete sentences is another problem. Oh, let's wait for that bell. It's obviously not dismissing you. Hold your horses. Fragments or incomplete sentences. Sometimes you may hear things like, he gave his mother an extravagant gift after the argument, in spite of everything. While when you're talking, it doesn't sound like anything's wrong with that. When you look at the way it's written, you can't have that period there. In spite of everything isn't a sentence by itself. Do you hear it? In spite of everything, in spite of what? You're waiting for the rest of that thought to finish, so it can't be a sentence by itself. Instead, you need to combine those two sentences together because this is a dependent clause. It depends on the independent clause that goes with it. In spite of everything, he gave his mother an extravagant gift after the argument. Or, he gave his mother an extravagant gift after the argument, comma, in spite of everything. Either way would work. All right, now we just watched a lesson on commas, so let's see if you recognize the problem. In case you haven't noticed, my real name doesn't appear in the article. That sounds fine to our ears, but in case you haven't noticed, my real name doesn't appear in the article. There's a pause there. And according to Shakespeare, who kind of invented the system that we have today of grammar, believe it or not, a comma is a quarter breath. A semicolon is a half breath, and a period is a full breath. He was trying to give his actors different elements to show them where to take a pause or a breath. And that's translated into a lot of our current grammar system today. So if you think about it, a comma is an eighth, or no, I'm sorry, a comma is a quarter, a period is a full, so that period plus a comma in the semicolon is a half. It's a visual system. All right, what about homophones? I know you guys know this one because you've gotten it like every year of your entire lives in English class. So, I don't believe it's finally Friday. We know what's wrong with that. I don't believe it's finally Friday. When you're using a contraction, it is, you have to make sure you include the apostrophe, like we learned in class. All right. The other problem is sometimes people go comma crazy. They throw commas in everywhere. They're like, comma, comma, comma. But it sounds weird to pause that often too. The man jumped into a black sedan and he drove away before being noticed. Like, no, that's way choppy. The man jumped into a black sedan. That is one thought. And he drove away before being noticed. That's another. In this case, we've got our first sentence, our first complete thought, and then we have a comma and a conjunction, and then we have our second sentence, and that's what pulls the two halves together. All right, misplaced and dangling modifiers as well as vague pronouns. This one's really hard, but it's one that you need to learn because it's one that's tested on the PSAT and the SAT a lot. So this is going to sound fine, but it's wrong. While walking on the sidewalk, Mary found a sparkly girl's bracelet. You're like, what's wrong with that? While walking on the sidewalk, Mary found a sparkly girl's bracelet. Okay, I mean, I can see that, I can picture it. The problem is what you've actually done is you've put your modifier in the wrong spot, okay? Mary found a sparkly girl's bracelet. That's saying that the girl is the one that sparkles, not the bracelet sparkles. I mean, you could be referring to her personality, but I don't think so. I think you were trying to say that the bracelet was sparkly and it probably belonged to a girl. So here's what you have to do. While walking on the sidewalk, Mary found a girl's sparkly bracelet. Now it's correct. That one's tricky. Be careful. All right, what about run-ons? She tried to sneak out of her house. Her mother saw her leaving. Ooh, those are two complete and different thoughts. She tried to sneak out of the house. Her mother saw her leaving. Those are two independent phrases. So you can't just smoosh them together. You have to separate them. You can put a period here, or you can put a semicolon there, or you can use a comma and a conjunction. Those are your three options. One of the other problems is confusing jumble or sentence sprawl. Jason was planning to attend his friend's wedding on June 30th, but at the last minute he found out he had jury duty, so he couldn't attend the wedding, and he felt really guilty about it. Way too much going on there. Again, while we understand it, it would be much, much, much better to break that down into smaller pieces. Unexpectedly, Jason was called for jury duty and couldn't attend his friend's June 30th wedding. He felt guilty about missing it. Much cleaner. All right, last two. Comma splices, semicolons, and colon mistakes. My intention was to take her out to dinner. However, I decided not to invite her after all. Again, this sounds fine, but the problem is that what you've got is two different sentences. Those two different sentences are being joined by a comma. A comma is too weak. As we talked about, a comma is just a quarter power, okay? You need to use either a half power or a full power in order to pull those things together. So what you could do is, my intention was to take her out to dinner, period. However, I decided not to invite her after all. But really, those two ideas go together very well. When you're trying to say that thing A and thing B really are interlinked, it's much better to use a semicolon. So, my intention was to take her out to dinner. However, I decided not to invite her after all. Okay, So that's showing that those things are connected. And finally, split infinitives, another one that's really hard and really tricky and that they'll focus on more in high school, but I just want you to be introduced to now. Incorrect. She tried to quickly finish the book before she had to leave. I know this sounds correct, but quickly is modifying the wrong thing. She tried to finish the book quickly before she had to leave. That's the correct way to do it. I'm not going to spend too much time on split infinitives, and I'm not going to count off any points on this assignment if you don't understand that yet, because they are going to teach it to you more in high school, okay? Okay. Now, take a second, look at this, and see if you can spot the mistakes. Number 1, you are the gentlest lamb I have ever seen. Number 2, what an adorable fluffy creature. What time is it? Oh man, it's already 8 a.m. I need to get to LA Fitness ASAP. It's finally Friday! I accept your Xbox Live Weekend-a-thon challenge. She knew immediately what was going to happen next. Without thinking, she ran for the car. Oh man, Jenny is late again. No good. When Dan saw the puppy, he was happy. Did you find the mistakes? Let's see. The first 2 were spelling errors, lamb and creature. The second 2 had to do with capitalization. AM and LA Fitness and ASAP need to be capitalized. We had some homophone issues in numbers 4, 5, and 6 with its and except versus except. We also had some punctuation problems with 7 and 8. 1, a comma didn't belong, and 1, a comma was missing. And then in 9 and 10, we had some usage issues. No good is a fragment and not a sentence that doesn't make sense as a sentence by itself. And we have a vague pronoun in the last sentence. We can't tell if it's saying that he is talking about Dan or he is talking about the puppy. So we don't know who's happy. All right. Good job, guys. So I hope that you guys realize that grammar really is important. I know that it's not the most exciting subject in the world to learn, but it is something that employers are increasingly say is a problem with the younger generations, that no one's teaching you these things and that they aren't seeing proper usage in your writing, and that makes people think you're dumb. I know that that's not true. Some of the people in my life that I love the most are people who struggle immensely with the English language and with grammar in general. But it is something that people do judge you on, and judge you pretty harshly, especially in a very high-end career or in a professional workspace. So if you plan on being a big CEO or going into publishing or being a doctor, you need to make sure that you know how to write correctly, and in the right circumstances, how to speak correctly as well. All right, that's the lesson. Thanks, guys.